In this video, we'll review some of the circle terminology, but also introduce some new terminology. So we'll start with the circumference. The circumference of a circle is just the distance around the outside. So if you just follow that sort of green path along the outside of the circle, that would be the circumference. So this term might be a new one for you. It's a chord. So a chord basically is a line segment inside the circle that connects any 2 points on the circumference. So here we have a point here. We have another point at some other point on the circumference of the circle. So 2 points on the circumference of the circle, and we draw a line that connects those 2 points. That would be a chord. And a circle can have a whole bunch of different chords within it. That's just an example of one chord. All right, let's move on to the next one. The next one I think is a term that you probably know already, the diameter. The diameter is a chord that passes through the center of the circle. So we put a point on one end and we draw a line straight through that and through the center of the circle, and we get to the other end of the circle. So the diameter is a chord. It's a special kind of chord, and then it goes through the center of the circle. A radius would be the line segment that goes from the center of the circle out to the circumference. And again, we can draw that radius wherever we like, and all of the radii in a circle would be equal in length. And one more thing to mention is that the radius is equal to half of the diameter. And you can see that here. We have a radius going off to the right. We could draw another radius going in the opposite direction, which would be the same length. So we can see that those two radii make up the one diameter. All right, let's move along here to the next page. An arc is a part of the circle that joins 2 points. So you can see here that we have a circle, and if we start with a point here and another point over here, the arc is that path along the edge of the circle, so along the circumference, that's traced between those 2 points that are on the circumference. So that's an arc. And the segment, next part is a segment, is the area that's bound by an arc in a segment. That should not say segment, that should say an arc and a chord. We'll just fix that up. So here we have a chord. So there's our chord. Here's the arc. The segment is the area. Oh, I didn't do a good job there. Let's try that again. Is the area that's bound but between those two things. So the chord, I'll just label this as a chord, so you can see that there, and the arc. So that area is what we would call the segment. And then moving on, we have something that's called a tangent. We'll get into some tangent ideas a little bit later on, but for now, when we're talking about a tangent of a circle, that would be a line that only touches the circle at one point. So you can see that here, somewhere in here, that line touches the circle at exactly 1 point. So you can see that the line kind of kisses the circle and then moves off away from the edge of the circle. So we call that a tangent to the circle. Now the other line, shown here is what we would call a secant, and a secant is just a line that passes through 2 points. Now you might be wondering, what's the difference between a chord and a secant? Remember that the chord was a segment. It only went from the circumference, from a point on the circumference to another point on the circumference. Whereas a secant is a line that goes through those 2 points. You can see here that this line keeps going forever in both directions. So that's how we sort of delineate between a secant and a chord. All right, moving right along. A couple more, and then that'll be it. So the central angle is any angle that is formed by 2 radii of a circle. So if I draw a radius, this blue line here would be a radius. This other blue line here would also be a radius. Those 2 radii would meet at the center of the circle, and we create this section here, and the angle that is between those 2 radii is what we would call a central angle. And the sector is what we would give as a terminology, with the name we would give to this section, this area that's enclosed by the radii and the arc of the circle over here. So here it says that the sector is the area of a circle that's enclosed by two radii of a circle and the arc created by the endpoints of the radii. So here are the radii, 1 and 2, and the arc created by the endpoints of those. And then the last definition that we need is for inscribed angles. An inscribed angle is just the angle that's formed between two chords. So here we have two chords, 1 and 2. And the angle between those two chords is what we would call the inscribed angle. So this theta here would be the inscribed angle. Now, obviously here, if we're going to have an angle between those two chords have to share an endpoint. So this point right here, otherwise they wouldn't meet, and it would be, I shouldn't say impossible, but it would be challenging to find the angle between them. So that's what this point right here about they share one endpoint, and that endpoint must be on the circumference. So the endpoint is here on the circumference. We have a chord and another chord. The angle between them, it would be this kind of inscribed angle. And you can see that's a little bit different from the central angle. The central angle measured from the center of the circle, whereas the inscribed angle is not. It's measured from the outer edge of the circle. So that's a bit of a review of some terminology for circles and probably some new terminology as well. So this will be terminology that we use throughout the course in different spots. So we wanted to make sure that you had a good sort of basis there.